Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rob, and today we're going to be bringing you yet another entry-level receiver from Costco. This makes a total of 3 receivers that we reviewed from Costco, all coming in at under $400, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the DENON AVR-S750H. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then stick around and we'll get into it right after the intro. Alright, before we get started, I want to quickly mention that this receiver is on sale right now for $350 until April 25th, 2021. And as far as we know, it can only be bought online at Costco.com. And of course, you'll need to have a Costco membership to place your order. So as we mentioned, we've already reviewed the Yamaha and Onkyo receivers. And we got quite a bit of feedback asking us if it would be possible to get the DENON S750H in for a review. Unfortunately, they were not available online at Costco.com, and they only seem to be sold at certain Costcos around the country. But we didn't get discouraged with this, and we literally checked Costco.com every single day until eventually we lucked out and snagged one online, so we were able to start evaluating it for the review. Now, with all of that said, the DENON AVR-S750H is a 7.2 channel 4K Ultra HD receiver with 165 watts per channel, or at least that's what they claim on Denon's website. They go on to clarify that in reality, the 165 watt rating is for one channel driven at a 6 ohm load at 10% total harmonic distortion. So needless to say, you're not going to be getting a ton of power out of this receiver. But we still had high hopes that the Denon would sound okay, because after all, they are using a discrete Class AB amplifier design. And we try not to prejudge anything we review based on the manufacturer's numbers alone. To further clarify, Denon also rates the amps at 75 watts at 8 ohms with 2 channels driven with a THD of 0.08%. They also give another rating of 110 watts with 2 channels driven, outputting 0.7% distortion at 6 ohms. This receiver also supports all of the usual formats like Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, DTS Virtual X, and it supports 4K at 60 Hz with HDCP 2.3 thanks to its HDMI 2.0B connector. I think Denon has done a really good job with the looks of this receiver. The brushed aluminum looking faceplate, which is plastic by the way, gives it the appearance of a much higher end piece of gear, and it also comes with a really nice big digital display. Around the back, you get 2 adjustable Wi-Fi antennas, a phono input, assignable audio inputs, 2 mono subwoofer pre-outs, assignable video inputs, 1 coaxial input, and 2 optical inputs. We also have an Ethernet network connection, 5 HDMI 2.0B inputs supporting 4K at 60 Hz and HDCP 2.3 as mentioned before, and 1 HDMI output that supports ARC and eARC. Along the bottom are the 7-channel speaker binding posts, 2 of which are assignable, so you can either have a 7.2 channel surround sound system or a 5.2.2 Dolby Atmos system. Dimensions on the S750H are 17.1 inches wide by 13.3 inches deep by 6 inches tall, and it weighs in at 19 pounds or about 8.5 kilograms. Now with the hardware out of the way, this receiver also has a lot of really cool software features that might be useful to some of you that want to take advantage of more modern setups. Things like integration with Amazon Echo, Google Home, Apple HomePod, and the HEOS app, as well as modern video features like HDR10, HLG, Dolby Vision, auto low latency pass-through, and more. Like many other receivers on the market, the S750H also features built-in auto room correction, and Denon also chose to pack in Odyssey Multi-EQ with this AVR. Now, we decided not to use the automatic room correction for reasons that we've mentioned in previous reviews. But if you do plan on using it in your setup, we would recommend listening to the receiver in its default configuration before running the auto room correction, just so you can get a baseline reference of how the receiver sounds. Personally, we always prefer setting up receivers by ear, as it gives us a lot more control in getting the system sounding just right to our liking. But if it's not something you've done before, then you might want to give the auto room correction a try and then tweak the sound to your liking. In the case of this Denon, it sounded very good right out of the box, and it only needed a little bit of tuning on our part to get it sounding quite good. The overall sound of the S750H was very smooth and clean, and it seemed to have more than enough power to drive my SVS Prime bookshelves and center channel. Now I did have to adjust the speaker levels a bit because my Vandersteen surround speakers were way too loud. And I also had to bump up the center channel volume because it seemed to be a bit quiet. After these adjustments, all of our movie watching was very enjoyable. Nothing about the sound on this receiver stood out as being bad or unpleasant. One thing I always listen for when reviewing receivers is any kind of harshness along with bloated, muddy bass kind of sound as you crank up the volume. This could indicate that the receiver is running out of power and you'll start hearing distortion. Thankfully, I didn't run into any of these issues with the Denon at normal listening levels, but once I started cranking things up near reference level, it did struggle a bit with the SVS speakers due to their lower sensitivity. With that said, because of how well the Denon ran the SVS speakers at normal listening levels, I was curious to see how well it would run some of the other speakers that I have on hand. That's where the Aperion Audio Novus bookshelf and center speakers come into play, which we reviewed in a previous video. These are some awesome speakers and I highly recommend checking them out if you're in the market. Either way, the Denon did a fantastic job driving these speakers, and I have to admit that this combination sounded amazing for the price. Next, I wanted to see if the Denon could handle a power-hungry full-size tower speaker, so I hooked up my Vandersteen 2CE signatures that I normally power with a pair of 200-watt Emotiva monoblocks. As expected, this is where we started hitting the power limits of the S750H. At low to medium volumes, the receiver still sounded pretty good, but when we started pushing the Denon, it became obvious that it just didn't have the juice to run the Vandersteens. So, in order to prevent any damage to my speakers, we stopped the listening test there. This really wasn't a huge surprise for me because honestly, I think any receiver at this price point would have had a hard time with speakers like the Vandersteens. All in all, if you stick to small and efficient speakers, the Denon will work great. This receiver will get plenty loud and it should satisfy most listeners. With that said, the one question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind is how this receiver compares to other receivers Costco sells. As I mentioned previously, we took a look at both the Yamaha RX V6A and the Onkyo TX NR595 AVRs from Costco and even compared them head to head. If you haven't seen those reviews yet, make sure you go ahead and check them out, and we'll leave links in the description below. After releasing those videos, we got a lot of commenters asking us what our thoughts were on the Denon S750H. Well, this is going to be the part where the video starts to get subjective. Everybody hears sound differently, everybody has a different room, and everybody has different likes and dislikes when it comes to audio. So I can't say for sure if you'll like this receiver or not. With that said, personally, I was very pleased with the sound of this receiver. It had a very smooth and laid-back sound that I tend to prefer, while at the same time it still had plenty of detail and liveliness. I'm very sensitive to harsh sounds and listening fatigue, which is one reason I will never own some types of speakers, but to my ears the Denon didn't have any of those issues. I do want to say that for $400, any one of these receivers would be a great bargain, and I want to stress here that at this price point, all three of them sounded really good. So in my opinion, your choice is going to boil down to personal preference and features. As far as our opinion goes, out of the three Costco receivers we tested, we feel like the Denon offered the most consistent sound quality all throughout the bass, mid-range, and treble frequencies, which would explain why it was so easy for us to get this receiver set up to our liking. On the other hand, the Yamaha offered the most detailed and airy sound out of all of the entry-level models we tested, while the Onkyo did a really good job producing clear vocals that projected further out into the room and offered a very good bass response. Can you get a better receiver if you increase your budget? Of course you can. But if you just want basic features and decent sound quality at an affordable price, we think any of these are a great option. Personally, I like the way this Denon sounds more than the Yamaha or the Onkyo receivers, but that's just my take on it, and you might prefer the sound of one of the others. So I think the best case scenario here would be to try to get your hands on all three of them if possible, and see which one works and sounds best for you. Aside from the sound quality, there are other factors in each one of these receivers that might sway your decision. For example, the Yamaha has the newest HDMI 2.1 inputs, making it a lot more future-proof than the other two receivers. Both the Onkyo and the Denon are slightly older models, which would explain why they're using the older HDMI 2.0B standard, while the Yamaha RX V6A is one of Yamaha's most recent 2021 models. But in reality, this won't even be an issue unless you're trying to play a next-gen gaming console at 4K 120Hz and want all of the newest gaming features like VRR and ALLM, for instance. If you're just wanting a receiver to watch 4K movies up to 60 frames per second with Dolby Atmos surround sound, then any of these receivers will work perfectly fine. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up our thoughts and experiences with the Denon AVR-S750H. In this video, we tried to convey to you our honest opinions on this product. But in the end, it's going to be up to you to check out these receivers, listen to them in your own room, and decide which one of these receivers you prefer. We really hope you enjoyed this video, and please let us know if you have any questions or comments on the Denon AVR-S750H down in the comment section below, and we'll do our best to help you out. Also, go ahead and make sure you check out our reviews on both the Yamaha RX V6A and the Onkyo TX-NR595. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our future content. And as always, have an awesome day.